these players have to prove to us that they are worthy of our time and our heart and our emotion and all of our belief. And they certainly didn't do it in these last two games. This summer, in the Gold Cup, I hope Pochettino says, you know what? All of the accolades and all of the cachet and all of the resume that we have is all fine and well. But I need some down and dirty bastards out there. Hello, sunshine. I'm Alexi, Lalas, and welcome to the State of the Union podcast, where we look at the beautiful game on and off the field through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses. This show will be talking, a U.S. men's national team final window roundup, the diabolical Jesse Marsch, Padel, or whatever the hell you want to call it, an American soccer legend, Brazil is awful, bastardized pro-rel, Messi versus Ronaldo, but an interesting take on that, Berhalter's back, the historic Rose Bowl, earbuds, and so much more. But first, join me as always, my friend, my colleague, my guiding light, David Mosse, a soccer savant and a Fox soccer researcher and writer extraordinaire. Mosse, how you doing on this Wednesday, March 26th in the year 2025?
I'm doing well. We were back in the studio today. I do want to say something. I meant to do this at the end of our Sunday show at SoFi, and I didn't. I want to thank people by name who contributed so much to those shows because, you and I started doing this podcast in 2018 out of a closet in Playa Vista. It's grown so much since. We're now in this beautiful studio. But I felt like those two shows at SoFi were another milestone for us. So I want to shout out Sean Sullivan, John Marcus, John Hill, Josh, Carla, who were there with us, and the people back here like Kyla and Gabe who contributed as well. It was a fun couple days, huh?
Yeah, that's on me. I probably should have done that when we were doing the live show. We had a lot of stuff going on, but I echo what you are saying, and times 100, the incredible men and women that we have that, let's be honest, make us look good. And in that case, took us to a whole nother level. And by the way, you've responded out there, whether you're viewing or listening out there when it comes to the State of the Union. We had incredible numbers. Now, obviously, relative to the national team, we always get bigger numbers because people are really interested. And with the controversy and with the problems, it is to be expected. But we had numbers that just blew a lot of stuff out of the water. So thank you. And when you are talking about the State of the Union, it is much more than these two mugs that you see. Now, Mosse, when we came on back to our studio here, I just wanted to get this in because you were worried about your earbuds that you have there, right? Now, you use earbuds with a wire,
correct?
Right? So I use the earbuds that are wireless, the Bluetooth type of thing. But my wife has been on me for a long time now because evidently she feels that it's not safe, or it's going to be found to be not safe going forward. And I've seen the younger generation, and I'll put you a little bit in that younger generation, has started to revert back to the wires when it comes to that. I don't know if it's just like a cool retro thing for some of them, or if there is an actual problem. You use the wires because you don't like Bluetooth, or you just don't have Bluetooth?
I don't like Bluetooth. I prefer the wires.
Do you think that the government or some sort of potentially fatal or cancer-causing type of thing is happening when it comes to the Bluetooth thing?
Perhaps, but I haven't thought about it that deeply. That's not really the reason I don't.
But why would you like it more? Why would you like wires hanging around you?
It just, I don't know. It's easier physically to grab. I don't know. It's just what I'm used to.
All right. Hey, I'm in this morning, but I've already done my workout. All right. Usually I go and I run stairs. I run a lot of stairs. But this morning, my friends got me up early to play paddle. You know what this game is? Padel, whatever the hell they call it over there. Went down to Dignity Health. They have a bunch of courts down there. For those that don't know, that is the LA Galaxy complex down there in Carson, California. We were the only ones there. And our good friend Stu Holden was there. Rob Stone, our good friend Ben Grosson that I mentioned a bunch of times. Ben and Stu are very, very good. Stu's so good that he actually brings his own paddle, if that's how you pronounce it. This is my second time playing. I think I like it more than pickleball. It's a bigger court. I think it's more active. It's less ping-pongy. But it's the rage in some of these places, especially when it comes to like Spain and maybe down in your neck of the woods down there in Brazil and stuff like that.
Well, you were at Dignity Health Sports Park this morning. We were
Yes.
at SoFi the past few days. This upcoming Friday, I'm going to be at another venue, the Rose Bowl. I'm very excited about this. A friend of mine recommended this, and I signed up for it. I am going to do a Rose Bowl museum tour.
Ooh. And it's in the museum?
Yeah,
I mean, in the actual Rose Bowl.
as part of the tour, you get to actually go on the field, but then you go into they've converted one of the locker rooms into a quasi museum, and obviously it's going to be mostly college football, but there's also a soccer section. The '94 World Cup, the final was there, Brazil, Italy.
Yeah, I have so many days that I remember in those very locker rooms that you are probably going to see, and if they've been converted, then you're going to be in when it comes to the museum. Obviously, so many international games. And I had seen the Rose Bowl from afar growing up, but it was, to your point, a lot of American football. But then when it came to soccer, 94 World Cup, 99 World Cup, and being in there, even with the Galaxy, we played a couple of years that I was playing with the Galaxy before we came down to what was then became the Home Depot Center. We were at the Rose Bowl. I mean, I remember walking into the Rose Bowl locker room the morning of 9/11. And the late, great Ziggy Schmidt was our coach at that time, and him sitting us all down. And obviously, everybody was aware of what was going on. And I'll never forget him talking to us saying, today's not a day for us to be running around playing soccer. I want you to go home and I want you to be with your families. And we did not have training that day. But that was in that locker room, the same locker room where we celebrated the win against Colombia and so many other wonderful moments when it comes to the Rose Bowl. So I'll be looking forward to seeing what you have. So that's your what are you watching basically
Correct.
today. Okay. I only have one thing. I watched this nuts documentary over there on Hulu. I don't know when it came out, but it's called Captive Audience. And it's about this, horrible abduction back in the 70s of this 7-year-old who then made his way back home, escaped, and came back home 7 years later. His name was Stephen Stanier, and you may remember the story, but the story just gets even crazier because years later, his older brother, who was part of that whole abduction and return story, in that he was in the periphery of all of this incredible press coverage of it, ends up being a serial killer. And is the Yosemite who was responsible for the Yosemite killings, and just a wild trajectory and path, and a horrible path for this family to go through. So, but it was really interesting and a little disturbing, but just an amazing story that you think just the one story would be enough, and then you add on a whole nother one, which is insane. Should we light this candle, my friend?
Let's do it.
Where should we start?
Well, as mentioned, we were at SoFi on both Thursday and Sunday for the CONCACAF Nations League Final Four. It proved to be a disastrous couple of days for the U.S. national team. They lost 1-0 to Panama in the semis, and then 2-1 to Canada in the third-place game. We taped post-game pods from SoFi after each of those matches. Everybody should check those out. Stu Holden joined us for both of them. John Strong joined us for one of those. You've now had a few more days to reflect. Any lingering thoughts on the U.S. national team?
Well, if you listen to our shows, I think that there is a raw and immediate emotion that comes out. And that's part of what we are going for when we do a instant reaction, and in this case, a live show, which we often do. And then you think, okay, well, with a couple days, in the different air and the light of those different days, maybe you're going to feel different. I don't feel any different, and I do think that it only has the situation has only been exacerbated by more of the questioning of whether this team, one, is good enough, and that in and of itself would give us plenty to talk about, but also the real questioning as to whether these players care when they step on the field to represent what I feel is the greatest country in the world. And I think that conversation is going to continue. Now, I think it's also worth looking at the fact, and we talked a little bit about this, about what the Gold Cup is in this moment. We all know that the U.S. has won multiple Gold Cups. The U.S. going into a Gold Cup traditionally is one of the favorites. And even, notwithstanding what just happened this summer in the Gold Cup, the U.S. is going to be one of the favorites. But I think because of what has happened over not just the last last week, but over the last year and with Copa America, now there is a real pressure and onus on Mauricio Pochettino in the Gold Cup to at least show progress, at least show improvement, and to win back some of those hearts and minds, which will then be a year before the World Cup. I don't know how much of that he is thinking. I don't know if he is fazed by anything that happened over the last couple of games. I was listening to our good friend Tony Miola, thankfully back and healthy. He was on the radio over there on Sirius with Brian Dunseth and the show that they do, and they were talking about this team and a lot of the stuff that we were talking about in terms of how people view them and how they were viewed before, how they view now, and how we kind of want to view them into next summer. And I do think that we have to have some perspective and we have to have a little belief, but these players have to prove to us that they are worthy of our time and our heart and our emotion and all of our belief. And they certainly didn't do it in these last two games. This summer, in the Gold Cup, I hope Pochettino says, you know what? All of the accolades and all of the cachet and all of the resume that we have is all fine and well. But I need some down and dirty bastards out there. I need some people that are going to run through a wall. I need some people that maybe from a talent perspective aren't as good, but I'm going to make it up because they are going to, and I hate to use this word care, but they are going to care more. And this camp, I mean, who really came out looking good other than Diego Luna? And why did he come out looking good? Not just because he was effective on the field, but the way in which he played. It is infectious and it passes the eye test. People want to see more of that.
Stu got a lot of credit for saying that these players aren't that good. They're not as good as we thought they were. And Stu and I were here last night covering Gold Cup qualifying. I briefly discussed this with him because I think it merits some unpacking.
Okay.
Over the past few years, there have been people who have suggested that the U.S. has enough talent now that with the right coach and home field advantage, it's plausible that they could win the 26 World Cup. That's preposterous to me. I've said that on this podcast. That, to me, is overrating this generation of players. To me, the U.S. is nowhere close to being able to contemplate winning a World Cup. If you watched Argentina last night and some of these UEFA Nations League games and teams like Spain and France, there's a level of football being played out there that's still completely beyond the U.S. So I think that's where that conversation kicks in. But to me, it's sort of a weird take to have after a loss to Panama because I've seen these U.S. players beat Panama plenty of times. The U.S. beat Panama 5-1 in qualifying for the last World Cup. The U.S. had won the last 3 editions of the CONCACAF Nations League. The last couple of games they played against Mexico in this competition had us debating whether this was even a rivalry anymore because the U.S. was so much better that it was starting to feel ho-hum to beat Mexico. So it wasn't like these players underperformed by some arbitrary standard we've set for them. They underperformed by the standard they had set for themselves the previous couple of years. So that's where I think this conversation kicks in about motivation. And is it that these players that play in Europe are starting to get bored with CONCACAF competition? Or is it the manager? Is it Pochettino? And he's doing different things that they're not comfortable with. So I think that's why I went to those places first rather than this whole larger conversation about the players not being good enough.
Look, I know that when we talk, when I say we in the broadcast world, right? When we talk, we recognize that the way we say things is as important as what we say. And there is an element of performance. I've talked to you about this before. And there is an element of being provocative and ultimately being entertaining in the things that you say and not just saying boring, mundane things that everybody says. So when you say it's preposterous for an American team and this American team to talk about winning the World Cup, is it just because the there isn't there and the numbers don't add up? Because if before the 1980 Olympics, somebody had said the U.S. is going to win the gold medal, would that have been preposterous? Given the age of the players, the inexperience of the players, and the quality that they were playing against?
Well, I think the vein in which those comments were made was that, wow, the U.S. now has the talent to go toe-to-toe with these top teams. And I think people got carried away. You see a few of these U.S. players playing for big European clubs, and suddenly you think that the U.S. is there talent-wise, and I don't think they are. So I think it's just a major stretch at this point to think that this collection of U.S. players, even on their good days, I never came away thinking that this team was ready to win a World Cup.
But even on their good days, you never thought that the 1980 team was going to win a gold medal.
No, because to win the World Cup, you needed to have 3 or 4 of those Soviet Union games.
Fine, but my point is that when we do this every single cycle, a player or a coach or a pundit will go and say, this team is going to win the World Cup, or this team I think can win the World Cup, or this team should go into this tournament believing that they can win the World Cup. Because what you are believing in is doing something that we haven't seen before. And that's where a lot of it's not negativity for a lot of people, it's just the reality of the situation. But the whole point is, as good as this team may get, or even is right now, winning the Men's World Cup is going to be a surprise. Winning the Men's World Cup is going to be done in a vein where you're going to need a little bit of luck. The soccer gods are going to have to smile upon you, and you are going to do it despite the fact that most people are going to say, you can't do this and it can't be done because it hasn't been done in the past and I just don't see it. And so I push back when people are angry and they think you're gaslighting or think that you are being Pollyanna and delusional when you talk about a U.S. men's national team winning the World Cup. Yes, there's only 440 days plus days before the World Cup. A lot can change. I was looking actually at the lineup in the summer before the World Cup, and I know it was a long time ago. I know it was a different century. I was looking at the lineup in the summer for the national team, U.S. men's national team, the summer before the World Cup. And there were not only players that weren't on the field a year later, but there were players that were starting that didn't even make the team. So I'm starting to think that things can change in the next year. They have to change in the next year. And if you're going to start changing it, start changing this summer for Mauricio Pochettino. He said so many times, I don't care where you play. I just want you to be good at soccer. All right, we'll go figure it out. I will say also there are some possibilities of other players coming into the pool, including players that are getting their passports. So this team may look very, very different come the summer of 2026 as opposed to what they look like right now.
Now, I mentioned Canada beat the U.S. in the third place game. One sour note, though, Alphonso Davies came off injured early in that game, and my career as a doctor is over because
all right, can we get into this for just a second
I said on Sunday's pod that Bayern Munich fans had nothing to worry about. I saw Davies after the game. He looked fine. And then it comes out today that he tore his ACL. He's out 6 months. And evidently the Davies camp is mad at Jesse Marsch because of the way he handled him in these 2 games. Is it possible that Jesse Marsch was so obsessed with beating the U.S. that he put Alphonso Davies out on the field when he shouldn't have been there, and that caused this injury?
All right, there's 2 things that I want to mention here. Let's first deal with you, okay? Now, my friend, you have been involved in this soccer game for a long time, and you have been involved in this TV soccer game for a long time. What is the first rule of broadcasting? Don't diagnose from behind the mic or from the press box or anything like that. Now, you thought you had some inside information. We were down in the bowels of SoFi. You saw him walking around, and you're thinking, oh, that's fine. But
I was just trying to show off that I was where all the players are. And frankly, a little bit of blame goes to Sean Sullivan. He put that thought in my head when Davies walked by. He was like, he's fine.
Wow. Under the bus there. Okay, so that's that. As it relates to Alphonso Davies, look, this is horrible for him. And I feel horrible for him and for, Bayern Munich. I think he's going to come back. He's young, he's strong. Let's hope the surgery goes well and he comes back and he is the world-class player that I do believe and many believe he is. This is not Jesse Marsch's fault, okay? I think it's preposterous to blame Jesse Marsch.
To borrow my word.
Because of this, Mosse. The national team is about representing your country. Inherent in it is that it is something more. There is a romance associated to it. It's not about money. I'm not saying you don't get paid, but let's be honest. These players, for the most part, they make their money when it comes to what they are doing with the club. which, by the way, is why the agent is coming out and talking about this. Because where do the agents make their money? This agent is making money off of Alphonso Davies being great, being world-class, and playing for Bayern Munich, and hopefully many, many more contracts. But a national team supersedes all of that, all the fame and all the money and all that type of stuff. That's all fine and well, but that's a club type of situation. National team, again, is about your responsibility, your pride in stepping on that field, because you're not gaining anything relative to what you do when you're with the club. And so Alphonso Davies playing in that game against the United States, by the way, had it been Panama, I don't know, maybe he would have had a different feel. So, yes, I do agree that at times you have to protect players from themselves and all that kind of stuff. But again, this goes to the, load management and all this kind of stuff. I love the fact that Alphonso Davies played in that game. I think it would have been weak sauce for him not to play in that game. And if he pushed through an injury, and people say, well, it was just a third-place game in the Nations League. If he pushed through it, I actually have more respect for him if he did that. And don't think for a second, if Alphonso Davies wasn't able to play, he wouldn't have played. And to the extent that Jesse Marsch forced him or coerced him into playing, fine. Jesse Marsch is the coach of the Canadian national team. And Jesse Marsch's job is to get results. And this is a big results. Is playing against the U.S. for Jesse Marsch an important thing and maybe more important than playing against another handful of teams? Yes. He's American. Didn't get the U.S. job. And he does have a chip on his shoulder, which, by the way, I think makes him good. And I think has made his ability to do his job better. He has used it. He has harnessed that. But I'm not buying this whole thing that, Alphonso Davies could have stumbled and fallen off the gangway getting off the plane.
Now, as you mentioned, the silver lining of the past few days is it really spices up the Gold Cup, which we have on our air this summer. It begins June 14, and the field is now set. Stu and I were here last night to cover Gold Cup qualifying. 7 teams punched their ticket: Trinidad and Tobago, Costa Rica, Jamaica, Honduras, Guatemala, Guadeloupe, and Suriname. And it's going to be a fun tournament. Miguel Herrera is now coaching Costa Rica,
Yep.
and there's a little bit of like a Jesse Marsch type dynamic where he's salty towards his native country. He was asked in the lead up to Costa Rica's second leg against Belize, how far behind is Costa Rica from Mexico or Panama? And Miguel Herrera said, well, Mexico has only reached the quarterfinals of World Cups on home soil. If you look at their World Cup record outside of Mexico, it's not that much better than Costa Rica's, and that got a lot of attention back in Mexico.
Ooh. Let me ask you something, because I was watching the game last night, and I was texting back and forth with Stu at a certain point, because I had a question. I mean, look, the game was over in terms of the aggregate and all that kind of stuff. So, they kind of had to talk about some bigger picture types of things. And I was curious as to, as we know, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, because they are hosting, they get automatic bids. So we're seeing a World Cup qualification that is upon us where those 3 big dogs are not going to be there, which opens up opportunity here. Now, there's a possibility for teams that aren't in the Gold Cup, but for the most part, I think you're going to look at the 3 and potentially 4, by the way, teams that come out. Who are your power rankings? What's your power rankings when it comes to who's coming out?
I agree with the 3 that Stu said. Panama, Costa Rica, and Jamaica, I believe, are the 3 he said, right?
Yes, but he did say potentially a wild card could have been Haiti, I think he mentioned.
Right.
Are you good with that?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah.
All right, so Guatemala, no. Trinidad and Tobago, no. Honduras? You got no Honduras there.
They would probably be the next team on the list, so maybe they'll go to the playoffs.
Well, I hope that we see something in the Gold Cup that makes us go, oh, okay, this could be interesting. Because ultimately, I still go back and I will never forget watching Panama in that Russia World Cup and seeing how important it was and how much it meant, not just to the players, but to the country. And not even to score goals or win, but literally just to be there. And that's what you're doing by expanding the World Cup. I don't think that you are lessening the importance or the drama of some of these teams, and I guarantee that if there are teams that are there for the first time, we're going to talk about CONMEBOL in a second. If there are teams that there the first time and those tears start falling down their cheeks during that anthem, that's pretty cool.
And Panama, I thought, put up a good fight again against Mexico on Sunday, as they did in the Gold Cup final in 23, but they lost again, 2-1 Mexico. Raul Jimenez with both goals. I still don't think this Mexico team is that good, but with Javier Aguirre on the bench and Raul Jimenez up front, they've gotten some of their mojo back.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm happy for them, but it is this pendulum swing, and we've talked so much over the years about the gap, and it widens and then it closes, and Mexico's back, and then they're not, and it's a crisis, and it's not, and basically it's like a hot potato that we just kind of keep passing it around between the United States, Mexico, and even with what Canada has gone through, and so I guess it goes back to Pochettino's point. If you're going to peak at a World Cup because that trumps all. But again, you're putting all your cards in and all your chips in on a World Cup. It better come to fruition.
We transition to World Cup qualifying, and for the remainder of this pod, we are going to have to move, to quote Hank Stram, with some alacrity. Otherwise, it's going to be 2 hours.
Okay.
So, 4 teams punched their ticket to the 26th World Cup during this window. Japan and Iran from Asia, New Zealand from Oceania, and Argentina from CONMEBOL. They joined the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, who automatically qualified as hosts. So we know 7 of the 48. We'll get to Argentina in a minute, but just overall thoughts on the field starting to take shape. Does that get you really excited for the tournament?
I get excited. I post it every single time as it starts to populate and to see the different teams. I also think of it, yes, in terms of the competition. I think of it in terms of the history, teams that have been there before. And as I was saying before, teams that haven't been there before. I also think in terms of, and I think I've talked a little bit about this over on X, the geopolitical things that are going on that are always part of big international tournaments, and they will be part of 2026. And so, when you see the Irans coming in and these types of things and the relationships that they had, good, bad, wherever it ends up being, it's drama, it's theater that is going to be on display, and I love to see as it populates.
So Argentina actually qualified before taking the field on Tuesday by virtue of the Bolivia-Uruguay result. And then they celebrated that fact by thumping Brazil in Buenos Aires. Both teams were coming off victories in their first games in this window. Argentina had won 1-0 away to Uruguay thanks to a great goal by Thiago Almada. Brazil had beaten Colombia 2-1. Rafinha, Luis Diaz, and then Vinicius Jr. late. But it was all Argentina on Tuesday night. They won 4-1, and frankly, it felt worse than that watching the game. Julian Alvarez, Enzo Fernandez, Alexis McAllister, and Giuliano Simeone with the goals for Argentina. Mateus Cunha got one for Brazil. Even in a brilliant night, Argentina still managed to have a playing out of the back blunder, which gifted Brazil their only goal. But nevertheless, a great result for them. Just to put some context around this, Brazil's worst loss to Argentina since 1964. It either equals their worst ever World Cup qualifying defeat or it is their worst ever qualifying defeat. We lost 3-0 to Chile in 2000, and some places consider 4-1 worse than 3-0. I'm not sure why, but I'm seeing it reported 2 different ways. It's also the first time Brazil have conceded 4 goals in a competitive match since the 7-1 to Germany in 2014. And I have to say, this match reminded me of that one in that it was over before it started based on the way the 2 teams were set up. Brazil, for the past 8 months or so post-Copa America, have been playing in this 4-2-4 formation because we played in a 4-3-3 at the Copa America and looked anemic in attack. So Dorival Jr. decided the thing to do to jumpstart the attack was to take out a midfielder and insert an extra forward. It hasn't worked. It's looked unbalanced and disjointed. I frankly don't like that formation against any opponent, and I thought it was ludicrous to roll it out in a game away to Argentina while Argentina was playing with 4 midfielders. So that numerical advantage was the difference right there. Every time a Brazil player got the ball, he was surrounded. Every time an Argentinian player got the ball, he could lift his head up and had all these options. And so it was a mismatch from the beginning. It was ugly to watch. If Argentina had pushed, frankly, it could have been 7-1.
This was so bad. I think for those that are watching the show, you just saw Emi Martinez juggling the ball at a certain point and as they say, taking the piss out of Brazil. This morning when I was playing paddle, at one point, Stu, who's very good, started serving backhanded, and I immediately said, "Don't do that. Don't do that." In in the same way that Scaloni was like, no, 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 don't do that. Don't embarrass. Don't disrespect the game here. All right. So is this a hopeless type of situation for your Brazil?
It sounds like we're going to make another coaching change here. Dorival Jr. is going to be out, and then we're going to bring in somebody else. You're hearing the name Ancelotti again, but you'd have to wait until after the Club World Cup, which means
That's right.
Dorival Jr. would still coach, I guess, the June games, and then you'd bring in Ancelotti with less than a year until the World Cup. Or you're hearing possibly bringing Chichi back for a third World Cup.
Chichi.
Or Felipe Luis is now this rising star in the Brazilian coaching game. He's in charge of Flamengo, so he might be an option. But yeah, I think Dorival Jr. will not be Brazil's coach in the next World Cup. We're going to make another change here.
Man.
And yeah, to your point about Martinez, this rivalry has really flipped. We covered the game when it flipped, that 21 Copa America final at the Maracanã. Argentina won 1-0. Prior to that, Brazil had really dominated this rivalry for the previous 15 years. And since then, it's been all Argentina. And you can tell this generation of Argentinian players has no respect for this generation of Brazilian players. They think they're a bunch of posers. It frankly didn't even feel last night like Argentina played out of their minds. There was a ho-hum nature to it, just kind of taking care of business against an inferior opponent. That was the vibe to me, which made it even worse as a Brazilian.
Yeah, I didn't see the ruthlessness that I normally associate with not just this matchup, but with South American types of teams. I saw it from Argentina. Argentina will cut you. By the way, also, this should be said that this was a window without Messi. Thiago Almada kind of stepped in, and we know he's not Messi, but they played very, very well. We'll talk a little bit about that when we get to Portugal.
That is fascinating because for the last year and a half, in games of greater intensity, Messi has looked a bit off the pace. So they go out in this window without him. They win away to Uruguay and home to Brazil. And it's interesting to see in the next 15 months how Messi's role evolves. I don't think the 2016 will be built around him the way the 22 team was.
Okay. All right. We'll see. Where should we go to
One
now?
last South America note. I do want to shout out Paraguay because they've been lights out since the Copa America, unbeaten in 8 in qualifying, 4 wins, 4 draws. That includes wins over Brazil and Argentina and draws away to Uruguay and away to Colombia. They've surged up to 5th. They're definitely going to be in the World Cup. Alfaro doing a great job on the Paraguay bench, so shout out to them. We transitioned to the UEFA Nations League where we had some incredible matches the last few days. Quarterfinal ties will begin with Spain and the Netherlands. Remember, they had played to a 2-2 draw in Rotterdam in the first leg. It was 2-2 after 90 minutes in Valencia on Sunday. Oyarzabal, who remember scored the late winner against England in the Euro final, got both Spain goals. Depay and Maatsen scored for the Dutch. We go into extra time. Both teams got one there. Lamine Yamal for Spain and Xavi Simons for the Netherlands. We go to penalties and Spain prevail.
I mean, Spain ultimately prevailing is not necessarily a surprise, given that they are arguably the best team in the world. Actually, was really, and even in losing and not going through, really impressed with the Netherlands and the progress that they are making. And if they continue on this trajectory, it will be really fun and interesting to see what they ultimately look like in the 26 World Cup. Obviously, we saw them in the previous World Cup. We lost to them from a U.S. perspective in the previous World Cup. But they took everything that Spain dished out, but they also dished out plenty to Spain. And so they certainly have to hold their heads up high in this home and away series.
Croatia had beaten France 2-0 in Split. France returned the favor at home. Michael Olise and Ousmane Dembele with the goals. That sent the tie to penalties, and France prevailed.
All right. Well, we remember when in the first leg when Croatia was just kicking the crap out of France, and France looked uninterested, as France sometimes does. We all know they're still an incredible team with plenty of talent. And both of these teams, when it comes to Spain and France, while I think in the greater scheme of things, you would put them above both Netherlands and Croatia, it does say a lot about what Netherlands and Croatia, for that matter, can do, that they made them squeak it out.
Denmark had beaten Portugal 1-0 in Copenhagen. Portugal led 3-2 after 90 minutes in Lisbon. Ronaldo missed a penalty early, but then scored later on. Eriksson got one of the Denmark goals. We go to extra time. Trincão gets his second goal of the game. Gonçalo Ramos scored as well. So 5-2 Portugal in the night, 5-3 on aggregate. They move on.
All right, I got something to say about the Portugal relative to Ronaldo, and it goes back to something you mentioned earlier. But let's finish it up here with the final game, and then I'll come back to that.
Germany had beaten Italy 2-1 at the San Siro and then raced out to a 3-0 lead in Dortmund. Kimmich and Musiala among the scorers there. They looked to be in great shape. Italy did come storming back. Keane twice and Raspadori late. So it ended up being 3-3 on the night, but Germany did advance 5-4 in aggregate.
Yeah, so Germany, that's one where you go back in and say, okay, we won, but we can't afford to do that anymore. And a very un-German-like type of performance there. So, I mean, look at all the goals. There was a lot of goals here. I mean, goals are good from a fan perspective. They're not so good sometimes from a coaching perspective, especially if you're leaking them.
So the Final Four is set. It will take place in Germany. It'll be Germany, Portugal in Munich, and then Spain, France, and Stuttgart. And then the final will be in Munich. Ronaldo expected to be in the Portugal squad, and you have some thoughts on him.
Well, I want to ask you a question, and I'll throw it out to everybody out there. Look, the evergreen back and forth and conversation and debate about Messi and Ronaldo, I think it's still there. It's obviously changed a little bit with Messi winning the World Cup, but there is always going to be a compare and contrast between these two players, and as they are playing and as they make their way to what I think is going to be their final World Cup in 2026. You mentioned earlier that Argentina at times has looked not just good, but really good and different without Messi. We have seen at times Portugal play without Cristiano, but again, we see him on the field and scoring and missing, but also scoring. So which team right now, Mosse, do you think is better by subtraction? Argentina without Messi or Portugal without Cristiano Ronaldo?
I think Argentina without Messi would be better than Portugal without Ronaldo, but I think Argentina will have an easier time sort of incorporating Messi into what they're doing. While Portugal, the Ronaldo thing is a big issue to me. I think if he's on the field, invariably it becomes all about him and all the service gets funneled to him. And I think at times that can be to the detriment of the team.
Oh, wait, you don't think that Argentina defers to Messi when he's on the field?
That's what I say. It's going to be interesting to see the next 15 months how that goes. But I just have such high regard for Scaloni. I think he'll figure out a formula that works.
Yeah, I think both teams will figure out a formula. But when you just look at, I mean, if they were to play a World Cup final, and look, if you didn't have any ramifications, right? He just said, I need to put the best 11 out there and let the chips fall where they may. So it's not about ego. It's not about the federation pressuring you. It's not about, in this case, either Messi's people or Ronaldo's people screaming and yelling. If you just said, I just have to win this game, would you say, I'm taking out Cristiano Ronaldo from Portugal, or would you say I'm taking out Messi from Argentina? And if you did both of them, which team ultimately would be better? I do agree that I think Messi integrates in with just a soccer team better and quicker than a Cristiano. I also think that Messi can play multiple positions and kind of go back and forth between lines of positions that are on the field. Cristiano's he is what he is. From a pure physical perspective, Mosse, I mean, they're both in good shape. Messi picks and chooses his moments. Obviously, Cristiano Ronaldo is still in incredible shape. So I think that's a really hard one. I think I agree with you that. Well, I want to make sure I understand. I think that Argentina without Messi would still be better than Portugal without Cristiano Ronaldo. I think so. I don't know. That's what I'm going with.
One last note before we depart Europe. England, with 2 wins out of 2 in World Cup qualifying, they beat Albania and Latvia at Wembley. Harry Kane scored in both games, so they're off and running under Thomas Tuchel. I do think these 4 Nations League semifinalists, Spain, France, Germany, Portugal, and then you add England in there and Argentina. That's your clear top 6 right now.
Okay.
And then we'll see if in the next 15 months Brazil can get their act together enough to join that group, and those would be your World Cup contenders in 26.
Okay, where should we go to now?
All right, we transition to the European club game. Looking ahead to this upcoming weekend, we'll start in Serie A. Juventus made news during the international break. They made a coaching change. Thiago Motta is out. Igor Tudor is in, former Croatian international, former Juventus player, was also an assistant coach there. He's also coached the likes of Lazio and Marseille, so he takes charge now. They will host Genoa this upcoming weekend. We'll see what a new coach means for Weston, McKennie, and Timmy Weah.
So it's nothing new when it comes to Weston McKennie. So he would be like, all right, next man up. Let's figure it out. And this is what I do. This is the good and this is the bad. And we have seen time and time again where he endears himself to the coach that comes in. Now, this is a coach that they are hoping not only has the experience of coaching before, but that he's able to take it to another level, and that his secret sauce would be an intrinsic understanding of what this club is, of the tradition that it has, and the recognition that it still hasn't lived up to of late what they need to going forward. But I think we had talked earlier about the possibility of changes happening. And do you wait until the summer and then kind of make a clean break at the summer and start up? Or do you make a change now because you're worried about the place that you're going to finish? Or you just want to make that or send that message? We talked about it with AC Milan and others out there. So, I mean, we'll see. Is it a situation where he can coach them up? Or is this team, when it comes to Juventus, as good as it gets right now, and they have to wait to the summer to really make the changes that are going to make the difference?
Napoli will host AC Milan, a big test for Pulisic and Mosse against a Napoli side that's 3 points back of Inter at the top of the table.
Yeah, we've come to find out that Mosse potentially, the rumors are out there that he could leave in the summer. I don't think that's that surprising because I think he has value, but I also don't think that it wouldn't surprise me in the least if he's not in the plans of Milan, as opposed to someone like Christian Pulisic here. But we still look at Milan through the lens of red, white, and blue-colored glasses, and obviously with what Pulisic has done, and we don't fail to because we mention it each and every time, with the caveat that this is Christian Pulisic being arguably the best player on AC Milan, but this is not AC Milan.
FA Cup quarterfinals is upcoming weekend with Americans prominently involved. 2 of them will go head-to-head. Fulham hosts Crystal Palace, so either Jedi Robinson or Chris Richards will advance to Wembley.
Well, I mean, that's a good thing to have an American in a final, and with all the hoopla that happens with that. So we didn't see Jedi this window. We did see Chris Richards, although he came out of a game, although he then the second game he was running around and stuff like that. So hopefully he is able to be on the field. And one of them obviously is going to go. So that's a good thing.
That's a good point. If Jedi missed these U.S. games, then not sure if he's actually going to play in this match coming
Or
up.
they said, hey, we have this match coming. It's pretty important, and we're not going to let you go. I mean, they have to let you go, but there's ways around that.
Tyler Adams and Bournemouth will host Manchester City.
Interesting. Well, again, the way we're talking about Milan or Juventus, at least this year right now, Manchester City is open and available for the picking.
The other FA Cup quarterfinals, Brighton, Nottingham Forest, and then Preston, the only non-Premier League team in it, will host Aston Villa. So we'll see what happens with those.
Okay.
We transition to Ligue 1.
Ligue 1.
Monaco will host Nice. That's 3rd against 4th. The big news is Folarin Balogun could make his return. During the international break, he played in an under-23 friendly for Monaco and scored a hat-trick. So he seems to be fully
recovered. Remind me again who this guy is? What are we talking about?
Folarin Balogun.
Oh, yeah. I haven't heard that name in a while. So, look, again, we're through a window, and nobody has claimed that spot up top. So, recycle or find somebody else out there. Next man up. We know that Pepe's out. Balogun, if he's playing, that's great. But until he actually gets in and in front of Pochettino, he's still a long list of players that have been given an opportunity and haven't quite grabbed it yet with both hands.
We have a top of the table clash in the Netherlands. PSV will host Ajax. PSV, as we know, have imploded. They're now 6 points back of Ajax, so this is a virtual must-win. The good news, Sergiño Dest recently came back from injury, and Malik Tillman could make his return in this match. Pepe is out for the season, but at least you get Tillman and Dest back in there. And I will say, Sergiño Dest's importance for the U.S. national team was really underlined the last couple of games, so you hope that, PSV, they're bringing him back slowly, and that's understandable, but you hope he gets enough playing time that he's back to good form for the Gold Cup.
For Dest.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, if anything was readily apparent in watching these two games, even beyond the result, is how important Dest and Jedi are to this team. And again, the drop-off in quality and talent and options when it comes to the left back and the right back position, or if it's a different formation, at least the right side and the left side, and how important they are to this team.
We transitioned to Major League Soccer. By the way, we had a full round of games this past weekend, but we were so focused on the U.S. national team, we didn't really talk much about it. But now this upcoming weekend, we wanted to give some love to the Chicago Fire. They, by the way, handed Vancouver their first loss this past weekend. They've won 3 in a row. They're up to 5th in the East. They host Montreal. Greg Berhalter off to a pretty good start there.
I mean, we talked about the stories on the field and off the field of this season, and one of them was, what's Bruce Arena going to do up there in San Jose? And it started off great. It's kind of slid backwards over the last couple of weeks, but also Greg Berhalter. And coming off of the disappointment of the national team and getting fired from there, and then the reality that Chicago Fire haven't been relevant and haven't been good for a long time. So that he has come in and very, very quickly gotten the points and kind of turned some heads. I mean, look, regardless of what you think about Greg Berhalter when it comes to the national team, you have to be happy for him. Nobody likes to get fired, although he had plenty of opportunities, so nobody's crying for him. But comes into a Chicago Fire that, like I said, people were ambivalent of, and that's being kind, for a number of seasons. And again, early days, but so far, so good. And maybe the change or the return, I guess, when it comes to Greg Berhalter, of working day in and day out with the team is exactly what the doctor ordered.
The Fox game, St. Louis will host Austin. Both teams off to good starts. Austin 2nd in the West, St. Louis 5th.
Yeah, there's another one. Austin, that has had some struggles over the last couple of years. But again, I caution, we're still in March of an MLS season that is going to go through the ups and downs and the peaks and valleys of any season, but certainly one that's going to go through summer and international games and international competitions and all that kind of stuff. So things can change, and can change very quickly.
A couple of bonus games. Inter Miami hosts Philadelphia. We'll see about Messi. Inter Miami are going to have one eye on their upcoming CONCACAF Champions Cup quarterfinal with LAFC. The first leg is Wednesday on FS1. And then San Diego will host LAFC. That could be fun. That's a potential rivalry there. Another baseball season is upon us. Director Gabe is a big San Diego Padres fan. He hates the Dodgers with a passion. So I wonder if that translates to MLS as well.
Who are the Padres? The Padres are a San Diego team?
Correct.
Who do they play? They play baseball?
Oh, yeah. No, they're very good. They made
really?
the playoffs last year, but went out to the Dodgers.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, good job. Something to keep an eye on. And unfortunately, because it reared its head from a San Diego perspective with the chant over there, it's one thing if you're playing against a team that plays out of the back and doesn't give you an opportunity to have goal kicks, which is normally why this kind of stuff happens. LA, maybe a more direct type of team. The potential is there, and it's always interesting to see how people react to being told not to do something, and if that continues on over there. I think they've, so far, knock on wood, they've done a good job of quelling it since the first time where it did rear its head there, but you never know.
And then we wrap up a busy segment with this. The U.S. women's national team has 2 upcoming matches against Brazil, one at SoFi, the other at PayPal Park. And Emma Hayes named the squad for those games. It includes Trinity Rodman. It'll be her first appearance for the U.S. since the Olympic gold medal game against Brazil.
Well, good. I mean, there's a whole stable of players and quality players that have been out for either coach's choice, injury, whatever, millions of different things that could potentially keep you out of the lineup. But some of them now coming back in and just adding to the mix. I mean, look, Emma Hayes, everything that she has touched so far has pretty much turned to gold, and so there's very little that you can criticize her for. But the assessment of not just this next generation, but also the creation of competition, that's good because even if you're Trinity or anybody else out there, you're watching from the outside, and when people come along and say, okay, I'm scoring goals, or I'm playing well, or I'm starting here. That's ripe for some competition. So you're not for sure when it comes to anything. When it comes to Emma Hayes,
I mentioned the first of these two games is at SoFi. At the conclusion of Sunday's pod, I intimated that the field dimensions are what cost SoFi hosting the final of the 26 World Cup. And I did get a text message from a friend of ours to correct me on that. I guess it had more to do with the time zone than it did the field dimensions.
I didn't feel the need to correct you in the moment. You were riffing, and I love that. So why stand on something little like that? And for the people out there that are nitpicking when it comes to something that you say, that's give them their little moment. So you've corrected it. Now I hope this person feels good that you were able to come back and correct that.
That is it.
All right, that was a beefy A segment. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for AskAlexi. Okay, welcome back. It's time for AskAlexi, that part of the show where you send in your comments, questions, and concerns. Keep in mind that our handle out there on all the social media platforms is SOTU with Alexi. You can use that hashtag AskAlexi, or you can call into our State of the Union podcast hotline, which is 657-549-2297, 657-549-2297. Mosse, what do the folks want to know today?
First up, we have a voicemail. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Alexi. Hey, Mosse. This is Jerry from San Antonio, Texas. Just finished watching Panama beat the United States in the Nations League. Obviously, we're not going to go to the finals, but I've been watching soccer for a long time. I've been watching the national team for a long time. And every national team, there's always been a second member that steps up, right? So if we didn't have Landon Donovan, you always had a Cliff Dempsey. If you didn't have a Cliff Dempsey, you could fall back to a Michael Bradley and even to a Tim Howard, dare I say, from a Brian McBride to a Claudio Arena. So the question I have for you guys is, take Christian Pulisic off this team. Who is the second best player on this team? I'd like to hear your thoughts.
All right. Thank you, Jerry from San Antonio. The first one that comes to mind, even though he wasn't there at this window, is got to be Jedi Robinson. I think just from a pure, not just talent perspective, because everyone can have talent, but impact, game in and game out. And also, when he first burst on the scene, there was still a rawness to this game. And look, he still can do some crazy things, but I think that he has matured. And I think he recognizes that his ability to go forward doesn't always supersede his responsibilities on defense. And so I would definitely say from a Pulisic or behind Pulisic, it's Jedi Robinson. But again, we're talking about people that speak with their play. And I think maybe what Jerry is also referring to, especially when you bring up the likes of Clint Dempsey or Tim Howards and all these people, these not larger than life, but I think that one thing that this team lacks, and maybe it's just because we haven't seen it yet. And again, I go back to the fact that this was the second youngest team at the World Cup in the previous World Cup. So maybe it was just an immaturity and an inexperience. There is very little individual or collective personality about this team. Talented, we all know that. So I think just from a pure talent perspective, I would put Jedi Robinson behind Christian Pulisic. But there's nobody at Christian Pulisic's level that has the ability to change the game. And so when he is not on, Christian Pulisic, as was the case in this last window, there's very little to go to, either to actually do the thing on the field or the leadership and the assertion that comes with big, bold personalities.
I agree with you. Jedi Robinson and Tyler Adams are the next best players on the team. And from a leadership standpoint, the other dominant figures on the field. But from a creativity standpoint, if you're talking about taking some pressure off of Pulisic's shoulders, I do think that's why Gio Reyna is so important. If he could get his act together and get on the field, that's that other guy that in a game in which Pulisic is struggling, he can unlock defense with a great pass so I think that's the guy you really need to emerge to take some of that pressure off Pulisic's shoulders.
Can I just say something? Because you brought up Tyler Adams. And look, I got a lot of time for Tyler Adams, both as a player and as a person. I think he is an incredible player, and I also think that he is a really interesting and incredible person in the way that he handles himself. However, the responsibility that we have given him and the expectation that we have, because I hear him and others, when things don't go well, as they did in this last window, talk about the fact that, hey, we need to have more fire. Well, nobody has more ability to rile the troops up than Tyler Adams. And I know this was his, after a long injury type of thing, coming back into the national team. But if you want something done and you have the capability and the location that you're in enables you to do it, then don't come out after and say, we need to do this, we need to do this. Do it. And I wouldn't be saying this about Tyler Adams if I didn't believe that he could do it. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we're all wrong about Tyler Adams when it comes to his leadership. Maybe it's just all smoke and mirrors. I don't think so. But again, if time and time again, this team lacks personality, lacks perseverance, lacks spirit, grit, blah, 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 all the different things that not only we see from the outside, but then the players also recognize and talk about after the fact, then that's a problem. I don't care how interesting or articulate or mature you may be, even at a young age. Get it done. Tyler Adams and everybody else.
Next up, we have a question on X. Victor Acadra asks, what does bastardized version mean? What he's alluding to is, this was big news last week, the USL announcing they are going to adopt Pro-Rel across their different divisions.
Yeah, so, the evergreen topic of promotion relegation, inevitably when we're talking about this, there are different versions of Pro-Rel that have been brought up. In this case, this is a intra-league type of Pro-Rel. All the USL teams would form different leagues, and then within the USL structure would have promotion relegation. And my point is that for the zealots out there, they don't want that. They want they'll argue that they want a quote-unquote open system where everybody has the opportunity. But even that doesn't necessarily exist around the world. But it's obviously much more open than just having a specific league that has intra-league types of pro-rel. And I've talked about this with MLS in splitting off into an MLS1 and an MLS2, and some of the challenges that even doing that exists. But when I talk about a bastardized version, it means it's not the traditional version, and it's not the quote-unquote, even though it's not necessarily open league, where everybody has an opportunity to either climb up or be pushed down the pyramid relative to their performance and quote-unquote merit.
Yeah, I am somebody who finds this to be a bastardized version. I think you need the biggest, most prestigious league in the country to be at the top of that pyramid to give it some stakes. Now, maybe over time, this USL First Division they're going to launch will reach that level where it'll feel like a big carrot at the end of the stick. Because what you're looking to get out of Pro-Rel is you're looking to incentivize owners of these lower division teams to spend more and fans of these teams to take on greater interest. Mm-hmm. And, if these different USL leagues are indistinguishable from each other, then I don't think that's going to get any fan juice to, oh my God, I should be more excited now because we could move up from this USL division to that one. So it's not really going to achieve what you want as a goal from it.
I think it's better than nothing. And if indeed it is, this silver bullet for people to come running to your product, then even if it's intra-league, the whole point is that it creates incentive and it rewards merit and that it increases competition because people want advancement and they don't want to be pushed back down, even within an actual league out there. But it still remains to be seen whether USL is going to figure out a way to do this. But these are interesting conversations, and that's the only reason that I used bastardized version relative to promotion relegation out there. Good question, though, Victor, and sorry if I didn't make that clear.
That is it.
That's it? Okay, let's take another quick break. We'll finish this up one up on the other side with one for the road. Okay, welcome back. It's the end of our show, and at the end of each and every show, I give you my one for the road. Some sad news to report. The late, great now, Hank Steinbrecher, the former U.S. Soccer Federation. I'm going to call him a leader. He was the U.S. Soccer Secretary General, but I'm just going to call him a leader. And he fundamentally changed the makeup and the course of American soccer, whether it was men's or women's, in his capacity with the national team. Now, he did a whole lot of other stuff, player, coach, incredible businessman, but he brought that business acumen to the United States Soccer Federation and really brought it out of being much more of a mom and pop type of thing into the mainstream. And in doing so, had incredible success with sponsorships and marketing of the team. But that was the business side of Hank. Whether you're a men's national team player or women's national team player or anybody who has been involved in soccer and certainly was back then, you will have known Hank. And you will have known him for a staunch and fierce supporter, not just of soccer, but of the importance of the national teams, both men's and women's. For those that are watching, you just saw a picture, and it's Hank in the locker room, same locker room, Mosse, that you are probably going to see and visit when you go on your Rose Bowl tour. After the U.S.-Colombia game, a game which the U.S. famously beat Colombia in the Rose Bowl in the 1994 World Cup. And you can see the glee and the excitement and the pride on his face and the celebration, even though he hadn't kicked a ball. He was as much a part of the team as any of us that were running around on the field. And anybody that played in that era will know and will have experienced Hank talking to the national team, because it was something to behold. And the motivation and the motivational ability that he had to walk into a room of players. And I guess this, relates to what we're talking about right now. And to very clearly, but with incredible amounts of passion, articulate why it matters and what you are doing. And his love of not just the country, but of the military, and his respect and his admiration and the honor that he had for people that were going out, in this case, to represent the United States. And him talking about how important it was. I wish I could have bottled some of those speeches, because, here was a man that, was incredible when it came to the business of soccer and was so important in bringing us into a new age. But at his core, he was not just a fan, but he lived and breathed soccer and what soccer could mean and what soccer represented when it came to the national teams in particular. And he never let us forget how important it was and what we were doing. And when we didn't live up to that, he made sure that we understood that we were letting not just ourselves down or each other down, but we were letting our country down. And, in this moment where we are thinking about our national team and what's missing and do they care and all that kind of stuff, we could use some more Hanks. So thank you, Hank, for everything that you did when it comes to American soccer. And thank you for not just shaping the game off the field, but shaping a whole generation of players to recognize, and this is full circle, go back to what I started the show with, that the national team is something more. The national team is romantic. The national team is something special. And as soon as you start taking it for granted, you have lost. And I'm not talking about losing on the scoreboard, but you have lost something bigger. And Hank understood that. So, 77 years old, Hank Steinbrecher, thank you, thank you, thank you. Anything else, Mosse?
I'm going to call an audible here.
Okay, here we go.
I was originally going to do a whole spiel on the Kennedy assassination today. I'm going to save that for our next pod on Monday.
Okay.
Instead, I'll just close out by mentioning we have some NCAA basketball tournament Sweet 16 games coming up. Kyla's Duke will take on Arizona. Sean's Tennessee will take on Kentucky. And my beloved Michigan will take on Auburn. All tough games.
This is a bridge too far, though, for your Wolverines.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, we'll see. Now, interesting to note, the Final Four is in San Antonio, Texas. Sean Sullivan is a San Antonio native. So if Tennessee make it, he will probably go. And I'll tell you what, if Michigan make it, I think I would look to go. So,
well, as I mentioned on my the previous pod, I am off to a boys weekend type of thing that's heavily revolving around the NCAA tournament. So again, I bring absolutely no knowledge other than the fact that evidently Rutgers University has 2 players that are going to go top 5 in the NBA draft, but we can't make the NCAA tournament for some reason or another. So that's how we roll over there at Rutgers. Anything else?
That is
all
it.
Right. Keep downloading and reviewing and subscribing and rating and doing all the different things that you do out there. We appreciate it so much. And thank you so much again for everybody that tuned in for our live shows. Again, thank you to everybody behind the camera that made them go off with pretty much without a hitch. So we got that now in our toolbox. We will talk to you again, like Mosse said, next week. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy your soccer. And until then, and as always, my friends, size the day.